Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a really cool idea from technologist Ben Goertzel. It's all about a simple question. Why are some groups just way more creative and flexible than others? And this is a puzzle that has massive implications for everything, from how we build software to how we think about the future of AI.
All right, so let's start with a contrast that probably feels pretty familiar. On one side, you have your typical organizations, corporations, governments, that sort of thing. They tend to be secretive, super competitive, and honestly, pretty rigid. Their whole instinct is to protect themselves. But then you've got open source communities. I mean, these are global projects built by volunteers and sometimes even by fierce competitors, all working together. And the result? It's amazingly transparent, collaborative, and incredibly adaptive.
So here's the kicker, the real head-scratcher. Both of these groups are made up of the same kind of people. You know, regular folks with egos and ambitions. So how on earth do you get such wildly different results? Okay, let's get into it.
To figure this out, Goertzel says we need a new way of looking at things. He borrows a framework from psychologist Jeffrey Martin's work on consciousness, and it gives us this really useful lens for understanding why groups act the way they do.
So most organizations are what we can call location zero. Just think of them as having a conditional happiness. They feel good only when they're winning, when market share is up, when rivals are down. They hoard information, they get anxious about threats, and they are deeply, deeply attached to their own survival. This is basically the default setting for most companies and government agencies.
But open source communities, they act more like a location one organization. They operate from a place of what the source material calls unconditional okayness. Their sense of purpose isn't just about surviving or crushing the competition, and because of that, they can share knowledge freely, adapt to whatever comes their way, and even just dissolve or merge without some big existential crisis. For them, the mission is what matters, not the organization itself.
Now, you might be thinking the answer is pretty simple, right? The people who work on open source must just be, more enlightened, less driven by ego. Well, this is where the theory gets really fascinating.
So, is that it? Are open source folks just better people? Nicer? It seems like an easy answer, but when you actually look at the evidence, that whole idea just completely falls apart.
The reality is, a lot of these contributors are paid by huge corporations, and they're motivated by the same things that motivate all of us in a competitive field. You know, getting a promotion, building their personal brand, gaining status and respect from their peers. And ego? Oh yeah, there is no shortage of ego in these communities.
So, this is the crucial point. The people themselves are not fundamentally different. As Goertzel says, they have the same standard-issue egos, career anxieties, and status concerns you'd find anywhere. As individuals, they're operating from that same location zero mindset.
Which brings us right back to the big question. If it's not the people, then what in the world is it? Where does that difference come from?
The answer is the architecture. It's the structure. It's the rules of the game that everyone is playing by. The system itself is just designed in a way that produces a completely different kind of collective behavior. Okay, so how does this architecture actually work? Goertzel points to 5 key features that create what he calls an emergent non-ego. Basically, a group that acts with less defensiveness and way more flexibility than the individuals inside it.
All right, here are the 5 big rules. First, forkability. Second, permissive licensing. Third, radical transparency. Fourth, voluntary participation. And finally, number 5, no self-preservation instinct. You put all these together, and you get a system that behaves in this incredibly generous, flexible way, even if the people inside are just acting out of their own self-interest.
Let's just zoom in on one of these for a second. Forkability. This is the simple idea that anyone, at any time, can just copy the entire project and start their own version. It's like a built-in escape hatch in the system's DNA. And this illustrates the difference perfectly. In your typical company, a big disagreement leads to what? Office politics, maybe some backstabbing, or someone just quits. In open source, it leads to a fork. Both ideas get to live and see what works. This one rule means no single person or group can hold the project hostage. It totally changes what conflict is. It's not a fight to the death, it's a creative split.
So why are we talking about all this? Why does this organizational theory stuff matter so much right now? Well, because we are, right now, making these exact same architectural choices for what might be the most important technology humans have ever built, artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
And the default path, the one we're on right now,
is to build AGI inside these massive, secretive, defensive corporations. In other words, we're building it inside Location Zero systems.
And this really lays out the choice we're facing. Do we want an AGI built by a system designed to hoard data and protect its own existence at all costs? Or do we want one built by a system that shares knowledge freely and adapts for the good of everyone? The architecture we pick is going to directly shape the kind of intelligence we create.
And this leads to a really deep final idea here. The architecture doesn't just change how a group acts in the moment. Over time, it might actually change the people inside of it.
Goertzel calls this the recursive loop. The idea is pretty simple. The system structure shapes how we behave. When we repeat that behavior over and over, it becomes a habit, and eventually that habit can start to actually reshape who we are as people.
So get this, a well-designed system doesn't actually need perfect, enlightened people for it to work. But by encouraging things like collaboration and flexibility day after day, it might just help create them. Someone who spends years practicing non-defensiveness at work might just start bringing that into the rest of their life.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. We spend so much energy trying to improve ourselves as individuals. But what if the single best way to bring out the best in us is to start by building better systems for all of us to live and work in?